Hi, this is artist Kendra Fleshman. Welcome to the studio. For this tutorial, we're going to talk about mandalas and radial art forms. So a radial composition is one that has a balance to it and a symmetry that radiates outward from the center. Mandalas are traditionally a Buddhist or Hindu art form. However, you can find mandala type works, this radial symmetry, in all kinds of art forms, ancient and modern. For example, if you look at the work of the Mayan calendar or the Aztec sun, you will see this type of radiating outward. And even in Christianity, in like a rose window with the stained glass, you will see this type of a format. So for our mandala, we're going to use this kind of as a meditative piece. So it's not designed to be stressful. You can make it as difficult or as easy as you want. But you probably want to research or have some symbols in mind that you want to put into your piece. It can be simple shapes, or you can start to look at, like in this one, I started to look at lots of different flower forms, or this construction of the petals coming out and out and out, and that kind of scientific radial symmetry, the golden spiral. That kind of radiating out the feeling of a flower. So that's what this one was, really me just exploring different types of floral looks to it. And in this one, I was just having fun with shapes. But try and think a little bit about what symbols or what shapes you really enjoy drawing, and have those maybe, grab a sketchbook, do a bunch of shape sketches in here so you kind of have them ready to go. So let's talk about our supplies and what we're going to need. So to create the mandala drawing, you're going to absolutely have to have a pencil and a compass and a ruler. So the surface area, it depends on what you want to use to fill in the mandala. You don't have to use watercolors. Let's talk about what you can use if you're not going to do watercolors. If you have paper, and it doesn't have to be Bristol paper, you can even use copy paper if you want, but realize that copy paper is pretty thin, so you're going to need to choose something that's not going to tear the paper out. Bristol is nice because it's a thicker paper and it has a very smooth surface to it. You can use markers. So I would get, either if you're using Sharpies, I would use the thin Sharpies for the really, really tiny details, and then the bigger ones to fill in larger areas. You can also use color pencils. A quick little discussion about color pencils. The ones that I have right here, these are from Faber-Castell. These are really gorgeous, luscious color pencils, but they're also a little bit difficult to keep a fine point on. They tend to be more of a waxy, thicker color pencil. I love them. They're very blendable and they're really nice. But I might switch over to a harder lead if I was doing a color pencil one. It depends. You could get a pretty good point on these. Just be aware you're going to have to sharpen, and probably use a hand sharpener on these, because the electric sharpener, it just sharpens them down really fast, and that's expensive. So you can use watercolors that are really inexpensive, like these. These come in tubes. These are the little paint palette ones, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. These tend to be just fine. However, they will over time start to fade in the color, and you're a little bit limited in your color choices. They do mix pretty well. You can mix them and get some pretty good color mixes. As you can tell, I use the lids to do a lot of mixing. Absolutely don't use these brushes. I usually throw these away, or I will keep them for things where I just need to use, and I don't care if I trash a brush, because these are not very good at giving you lines that are tight. Okay. This one was created with these watercolors. Bright, vibrant, and fine. I also traced around the edges using a micron pen. So I drew it first in pencil and then traced over it with a micron pen. The microns are great. You can get down to like super tiny lines using these, and they're pretty permanent, so they don't smear and bleed into the watercolors. So these are really nice to have on hand. This mandala I created without the micron pens. I just did the pencil and then painted it in, and I used a little bit higher quality watercolor. This is made by Daniel Smith, and I'm sure that Grumbacher and Golden and Winsor Newton, they all have their own brands. The nice thing about watercolors over acrylic paints, you could use acrylic paints. The nice thing about watercolors is even though in my palette it looks all dried up, all I have to do is add some water to these and it reactivates and I can reuse them. So you have these little teeny tiny tubes, but you can keep using them again and again. Now acrylic paint you can use. The problem with acrylic paint is it dries very quickly, and when you're using these little teeny tiny brushes, it tends to just totally mess them up. The bristles will start to go like this because the paint gets down in the ferrule and it just fries your brushes. So I chose watercolors. I just thought, I hadn't used them in a while and I just thought they were quite beautiful. All right, let's talk a little bit about how to set up your mandala and how to actually start to draw one. I know this is like really fun round watercolor paper, 140-pound watercolor paper on this pad, and then when I'm done, I just very carefully peel it off. These are nice, but you don't have to have a round piece of paper. In fact, when you go to frame this or display this, this can present a little bit of a problem of how do I frame this. So I don't necessarily recommend that you do watercolor paper that's round. I just thought it was really cool and it inspired me to make a mandala, so I bought some. But what I'm going to do is start out on a piece of Bristol paper, and we're going to draw one, talk about how to kind of divide it up, and then I may take you through a real quick drawing on the round paper too. It's the same process. Again, take a look on the internet, or take some time, take a week, do some sketches in your sketchbook of just patterns, things that you would feel pretty confident of drawing over and over and over again. And don't feel like it has to be perfect, okay? Relax. This is supposed to be a meditative piece. So we're going to try and make this as relaxing as possible and not stressful at all. All right, let's get started. To start our mandala, we want to find the center of the paper. I find the quickest way to do that is to go, if you're using a rectangle piece of paper, is to go from corner to corner. And you don't have to draw a line all the way across. You could just make a little mark in the center and then use the other corners to create an X. I would recommend that you draw as lightly as you possibly can if you're going to use something where you don't want the pencil line to show. If you are going to trace it with marker, then it is not probably as necessary for you to go lightly. However, if you make a mistake and you press really hard with your pencil, it's going to be almost impossible to get that pencil line to come up. The first thing I'm going to do is find the edge over here, and I'm just going to take the compass create a circle where I've got my outside edge. And starting in the middle, I'm going to do a smaller circle. And then I'm going to do a small band, kind of like you're creating a target. then I'll do a little bit wider band. Maybe a medium-sized band right here. Whoops. Then another small band. Make this one really tiny. Maybe I'll just do some little zigzags in that area. Then a wider band. It starts to create kind of a rhythm or a pattern just using the different sizes in the circles. There we go. Now I want to kind of get rid of this X, so I'm going to use my kneadable eraser to take that off. To create patterns in here, we could definitely do that just by drawing on these circles, but we also might want to divide this up to make it a little bit easier. So I am going to find the center by measuring the paper. And this gets trickier when you're doing the round watercolor paper. So this is another advantage of not using the round watercolor paper. So this is a 12-inch paper, so 6 inches is our center point. I'm gonna make a mark on this side of the paper at 6 inches. And down the bottom, and I'm just gonna draw a line to divide our circle in half. Again, keep this line as light as possible. I'm drawing it darker so that you can hopefully see that. We're just going to start dividing this into sections. I find it's easier if you can divide it again. So just kind of keep going as many times as you can. Let's say I want to do 5 petals right here. If I have this divided again, I can put 1 petal here, maybe 2 more petals here, and I can start to count out exactly how many things I need to do to keep that even. So I'm going to divide this up again one more time. To locate the center of this piece of the pie right here, you could use your compass. You could also just kind of eyeball it. You could use a protractor and actually get that perfect. But if you have, the only thing you have is your compass. A technique is to take your compass, set it here, and you can kind of eyeball where it needs to go. Put your compass on this side, and that little mark right there is going to give you where the center is, and then you can just take your compass, even leave it where it is on its setting, and go ahead and mark. See, that one's off a little bit. There we go. So I'm marking the center of each of those lines, a little quadrant there. Then I can use my ruler, line up my marks, and it should go right through the center. So now I have this divided up into 8 sections, and that's going to give me some really good guidelines when I'm doing my patterns of where things are going to go. I'm going to start with a flower pattern. So I'm going to do a petal in each one of these. And notice that this petal is a little bit shorter than this one. If that's bothering me, then I just need to take my eraser Again, this is where if you go a little bit lighter with your pencil, it's going to be easier to erase. Again, it's designed to be meditative, not perfect. There I have my flower to start me off. I have some open area in here, so I'm just going to add a circle on each tip of the flower. In this band area here, I'm going to do a zigzag. I've got another wide band, so this is where I might want to think about patterns that have an object to them, like a flower, or maybe just a heart shape, maybe like a diamond shape. I can go ahead and make a mark where my estimate of where that middle part is of this piece. And I am going to again divide this with a point. Very simple shapes, no pressure. To decorate this a little bit more, I'm going to do some loops in the petals. So first I'm going to do a big loop at the bottom of each of these little points of the star that I've made. I think I'm going to leave this plain, but I'm going to make this part more complex. So what could I do in here? I could divide this up with stripes. That might look really nice. I could do little flowers in each one. Let's do this. I'm going to do a petal here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way around. Then from here, I'm going to add a smaller petal on each side. Alright, so it's starting to have a really nice look to it. So this is also a petal. It has a little bit different shape to it. And I've discovered that I can fit 3 really well. So I am going to make a little mark on my next one to try and help me make sure that these end up being about the same size. So now we have a really nice pattern going. It's getting a little busy here, so the next one, I've got a couple of options. I can go really busy in this tiny one, which is probably what I'm gonna do, and then let this area kind of rest the eye a little bit in this next band. So this little tiny band, I am going to just fill this with little ovals. Now we have our flower center. We have a band here that's a little bit complicated. Then we rest a little bit with these bigger elements here, dividing it up, and then these really tiny ones, just to give us this pattern, a nice tight composition here. So the next one, we have a pretty big area, so I need to think a little bit about what shapes I want to put in there. I'm getting a feeling of flowers, but I'm also get a feeling of like a quilt star. So do I want to push this more toward flowers, or do I want to explore this quilt star? I think the quilt star could be repeated here as I'm looking at this, and maybe use this area for another floral element. How about if we do a looser element? And I'm going to have to think about this a little bit. So I'm going to divide, just by eyeballing, I'm going to divide this up again. Because what I'm going to do is a little bit more complex, and I want to make sure that I get it lined up closer. All right, so now I've made some marks around here that help divide that up. I am going to attempt, here we go, I'm going to do a vine that kind of circles around. So I'm going to start here in this little section here. I'm going to do a loop like so, and I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do another loop, like making an S, I guess, a sideways S, backwards sideways S. Now I have my basic little vine piece. I need to add to that to make it look more like a vine. And when I get down to the bottom here, I am going to have it connect. I need to add some leaves to the vines. Let's start with, let's make them, well, I could do like an ivy shape where it has 3 points. I could make it just more of, I don't know, just a flat leaf with 1 point. I'm thinking of, you know, what I've done up here too and what would look the best. Probably if I repeat this type pattern. Let's do that. So I put it on the curve here. I'm going to go around, I'm going to do it on each one. You could do a whole vine, finish it out, then do a whole vine. I find if I do the pattern all the way around, I tend to get them looking more similar. a good start to our vine. At the end of our vine, let's do a flower. I'm trying to decide if I want my flower going this direction or if I want my flower going back this way. So I'm gonna look over here. Yeah, it might be kind of awesome. Let's try this one. Let's go here. I like that. And then I'm going to add in between. So it almost looks like a little clover flower or something. All right. Now, I started out with 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't have to be equal all the way around, so just remember that. But the 5 in the middle should probably all be the same if you can get it there. Our mandala is looking really nice. We've got some nice flower patterns going on here. Since this started to look a little bit like a quilt pattern, I did a little bit of research and I found this kind of repeating element here of, I think they call it like a stacking star, where they stack these together. I really like this look. So I'm going to use this in this outer ring. If I start with a triangle and then do my lines up and then connect those together, I think that's the easiest way to kind of transfer this onto this circular surface. So right here, I have this line coming down, and then I went ahead and I added some lines here. I haven't done it all the way around yet, but let's start out with that triangle shape. Now, do I want it to be, this longer one this direction, or do I want it to be narrower and then longer this direction? I have to think about that. Oh yeah, this is gonna look really cool. Yeah, I like that. All right, I think for this line, I'm gonna do one that's going the opposite direction. So now I've repeated that feeling of a quilt just by adding some patterns that are pretty common in quilt making. I'm going to divide those up. So my basic mandala shape is almost finished. I have this thin band right here that I think what I'd like to do is do something pretty complex like I did with the circles to just hold that together. And then I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to start to divide this up even further so that it gets more and more complex. At this point, I'm going to look at the mandala as a whole, and what I'm noticing right now is that this band right here really stands out. It has a lot of emphasis to it. So I think I need to put something else on this outside band. So just keep in mind, if you're going to add a mat, you're going to want to come in from the edge of your paper at least 1/4 of an inch, so that when you cut that mat and you lay it over the top, you don't have a gap. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's further divide up this outside edge, and then we'll talk a little bit about how I can add some things here and maybe a couple more elements here, and then we'll start to color it. Keep with the idea of the flower. I've got quite a bit of room in between these little pieces here, so I'm going to create some flowers. First, I'm just going to start out drawing circles all the way around. And because my centerpiece had really long petals, I'm going to try and do some longer petals on this one. Pretty much finished with the pencil part, and now I'm going to trace it with the micron. For this one, I'm going to start out with a micron 3 and see how that looks. You could also use different thicknesses of micron pens, which could be kind of awesome. Could so that you get different thicknesses of line. And by all means, you don't have to do the exact same pattern all the way around. Maybe try something where nothing matches. That could be pretty interesting too. Or maybe you alternate things where there's a flower and then there's a different design, so that you make a pattern that also goes around and changes. I'm starting to get some smudging from my hand. So one way to avoid that is to get a piece of paper towel or another piece of paper and set it down on here. So I'm going to do that. finished tracing the mandala with a micron pen, I actually used two different sizes. I used a .03 for the really fine lines, and then I jumped up to a .05 for a little bit thicker line. And you can tell that that kind of gives it a little bit of variation, which can be kind of interesting. You know, I really encourage you to experiment with the lines, not just with the colors. A couple of things I want to tell you about. In some areas, I did not trace, like right here, the guidelines, I left those white. And then you may notice where my tracing does not necessarily match the pencil. And what I find is when I'm starting to trace, I will notice areas that need fixing, and I will just go ahead and draw it correctly, like right here. I'll draw it correctly with the pen, or these little guys right here. I totally switch those to circles instead of loops. And I'll do that in pen, and then I can just erase it later. When you're erasing, I really suggest you use a kneadable eraser. It's nice and clean, and it doesn't tear up the paper very much. So when you're working with watercolor paper, you've got to be gentle. You need to draw very, very lightly with your pencil so that you can erase things really easy, like just taking and just going like that, really, really gently on the watercolor paper. So that's another reason Bristol or even photocopy paper is probably a good paper to start out on. All right, so here's our mandala. We finished drawing it. In the next tutorial, I'm going to talk about filling it in with different colors. But it looks good like this. I hope that you followed along and that you are going to try a mandala of your own.